around and just talk a little hitting, talk a little baseball. But before we get to that, John, you're one of the best evaluators of talent that I've ever met. Talk about these guys. What did you see there?
I like really a lot of my focus is watching some of the younger guys. But one of the things that I've seen, and it's kind of like as we progress in this game. Last night I was talking about like those buckets. Like your buckets that represent athleticism and buckets that represent skill. I saw some really advanced moves and some really good aspects to swing this morning. I kept saying, like, I caught myself, I'm like, man, I got to watch saying this much. Electric. All right? It's a term we use. It's just, what's the bat? Electric bat. Easy way to describe it. I kept saying it over and over and over and over again, which is a good thing. It's rare when you've got like a group of electric bats. They usually don't travel in herds. I think the other part that I saw was a lot of guys, we were just discussing a second ago, guys getting challenged. I think a lot of baseball is scripted. A lot of your practices are scripted. A lot of it's powder in your ass, all right, helping you along the way. And it's so incredibly important for you to challenge yourself and challenge your system because it exposes the aspects that you really need to become better at. Where's my boy at? Right there. You had one thing today, right? Your feet started getting squirrely on you and it affected you, right? You made yourself aware of it, you recognized it, you made the adjustment, and then you executed what you need to execute, right? That is self-correction. Because eventually along the way, if you're lucky, you're going to play all over the place. And maybe, you're with your hitting guy, with your club, you got a little bit of break, and then the next thing you know, you're in the Mexican League for the winter. You don't have that guy. And you've got to make adjustments on your own. And your manager doesn't give a crap. All right? Or you're trying to find a job. Same things. You've got to become incredibly self-aware. There's this trait that I see in what I call professional hitters. Everybody in the big leagues is a professional hitter, right? There's like a handful of professional hitters. And the thing that you always notice about them is that they're obsessive about hitting. And that's just not the swing. That's everything that they do. I was fortunate enough in actually, like when you see guys, when they get sent down from the big leagues to the minor leagues, and that guy's in the dugout and he never stops talking because he's trying to figure out what that pitcher's trying to do. He's working with other guys, he's hitting with other guys, having conversations about hitting. What do you feel? What do you see? Kind of almost like the cut from the cloth of where Eugene's at with it. It's okay to be that. It takes that. It's work, and that's the other aspect that I saw. I saw guys that were engaged in trying to get themselves better and make the most of their individual ability and optimize their moves. It was loud. I wasn't talking a lot because I got this microphone on, but probably can't hear much because there's a lot of pinging and popping going on, which is good.
So what you said was perfect. So one of my biggest failures as a coach, okay? I used to be a swing coach. When 108 opened, I was a swing coach, right? And what I saw was that guys became too reliant on me to tell them what to do. They didn't have the feel or the ability to make the adjustments on their own. So as I moved down the line and tried to figure all these things out, try to figure out how to help the guys in front of me, I've had to continue to try to find ways to give guys the tools to be able to make the adjustments on their own. And that comes through conversation, it comes through discussion, it comes through trying different things and understanding what happens, how you move. Think about the conversation we just had over there in the cage, right? Guy's getting stuck, his barrel's getting pinned, okay? What do you need? You need space. Your barrel's getting stuck. What are the ways that you could make adjustments to find space, right? You could gain more posture. You could close off. You could get your hands away from you. You could raise them. There's a lot of different options, but if we don't have that discussion and we don't talk through those kinds of things, when you leave here, you don't have the ability to make those adjustments on your own, right? So, I thought it'd be really cool for guys to talk about some of the things that they like to do, some of the drills they found successful, and some of the things that make their engine go, right? So, being Miller, what things are important to you? What are your fields? What things work for you?
I think, me and you knocked down the rabbit holes and so many different things, trying things out and just having a purpose for each drill I do or each movement I'm trying to create.
Any specifics coming to mind?
Yeah, so specifically, just being able to not spin off balls, basically, have D-cell patterns.
Right, but what drills? What fields? What things have been important to you?
So one of the the breakthrough drills I had was it was a reverse hips drill where, it helped me stop my hips from moving and go the other direction. And that happened in 2019. It was, I think we were looking at Miggy or something like that. And that feel helped me break through. And ever since then, I was just compressing baseballs. And
so this is the guy, so when I tell the story and I show this in presentations, that this kid hit, this big physical specimen, hit 250 his junior year with a couple of bombs, and then senior year, a couple weeks in, he's not hitting well, and he's, senior year. That's it. It's over after that, right? So he calls me on his way back on a trip from, I think you guys were at Sac State or something like that. I said, okay, come on. So he came over on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
We were in the cage till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Right, went over, got some food after,
Mm-hmm.
and we figured a couple things out. After that night, we had over 400 for the rest of the season. And it was 16 pumps, 20 doubles, and ended up getting drafted. Right? It was that one cage session that night. Right? But you guys have to have the tools and the ability to figure things out. Right? We have to continue, and he's always had a really elite mind for this stuff. Right? How about so Jake? Right? You are one of the most impressive kids. And I told this story last night when we were sitting there. We were at, I was at Jupiter, right? And I was down there to work with Ian and Noah, right? And I'm at the WWBA. And, I'm sitting with Noah's dad, Sal, and we're watching the game. And I said, who the hell is that kid? That kid knows what he's doing. That kid's got some feel for what he's doing. He came up to me after the game. Never met him before, never worked with him before. Came up to me after the game and said, "Hey, I just want to introduce myself. I follow your stuff, and I was just wondering, is there any possibility you could hit while you're here?" And I said, 100%. And then I ended up coming down to Orlando. This kid drove. He found out I was in Orlando. He drove 2.5 hours from Tampa to hit for an hour and a half and drove home. And when we talked through stuff in that session, what we ended up figuring out, right, he was having he felt like he wasn't striking the ball as consistently, and laying into the ball as he had to pass, right? And we tried a couple drills and we tried a couple things, and they really, they worked a little bit, but it wasn't it. And as we sat there and we had this conversation, right, what we found out was that, look, this kid's a 3-hole hitter, one of the best hitters in the country, one of the best hitter on his high school team, right? Getting looked at by all these organizations. This was the scout that turned him in because it was his area. He came to the session to watch him that day. And as we were sitting there talking through stuff, we found out that everybody's giving him nothing to hit. He was getting all off-speed pitches. Everybody's pitching around him. And what were his coaches, or what was in his head? Not even his coaches, but he was trying to stay back too much because he was getting off-speed pitches. He was thinking to stay back, but in reality, how do you hit off-speed pitches? They get hit further out in front. You're in the ground for the fastball on time. Everybody says that, right? So if you're in the ground already, how the hell are you going to stay back? You can't do both. Elite hitters go get that off-speed pitch. Go watch it. I figured that out. Did actually create it. That's why he's like a legend to me. He's the guy that created Baseball Spot. I figured that out by digging through that data. You can go on Baseball Spot and find anything you want. So I typed in zones 3, 6, and 9, which is outside for a right-handed hitter, off-speed pitches, breaking balls, right-handers, home runs and doubles, click enter, and now you get a list of all the guys that hit the most home runs and doubles on breaking pitches, right? And when you click each guy's name, every single one of them comes up. It's got all the data attached and a video. And all those guys are in the ground for the fastball, and then they're going to get the off-speed pitch. They're continuing to move out front, right? The reason guys can't adjust when you get told you're out front, it's usually because you're actually not out front enough, right? When you get told you're out front, it's this that's happening, right? You're peeling open because you don't have enough pressure into this side. You're not in the ground on the front side. When you watch Arenado go get that pitch, when you watch Trout go get that pitch, they're in the front side and then they go get the off-speed pitch. Think about A-Rod with that like walk-through, right, on the breaking balls. And as soon as that happened, and we said, how about this, just go get it. It was electric factor.
Big difference.
It was a huge difference. And he saw it, and it stayed, it stuck. Caesar, another scout that was here yesterday, was watching you hit, and wow, like it just stuck. So what are some of the things that you feel like have been important to you in your progression as a hitter? Because you have elite feel, you have elite work ethic, and you clearly grind in the cage.
I think the biggest thing I changed is like almost like not being afraid to go get the ball out in front. Like even in tee work, like I put it super far out in front almost to exaggerate it. Or like with an open stance and feel myself going to get it out in front. And then when I move to like with the forward move, I just put the tee almost like you're going to get an off-speed pitch, and I move it further out in front just so that I have to exaggerate that move forward instead of getting stuck on my backside. Because if you're on your backside, you're either going to like hit it off the end or you're going to topspin it. And you get like the true, you won't really like impact the ball the same way. So I think that was the biggest thing. The Conseco drill too was a big one for me just because you have to get into the ground in order to get out of the ground. And I think that like just anything where like it forces you to get to that front side like has really helped me just to be able to feel it. And like I'll even use it on deck or like after a pitch if I feel like I'm not in the ground the way I should be, I'll take a dry swing and like just have that same feel, and it kind of helps me to get locked into where I need to be. That and then closing myself off early too off the tee, and like even like trying to pull the ball in the air like helps me to get in that front side too. And then I'll move like to the outside pitch and kind of like we talked about like pulling the ball the other way. I think that helps me too to feel like on that front side instead of just like hitting against nothing and like slicing it more.
That's really good. My guy, Mr. Skeens. What's up, Tom? Come grab a seat. Bud? No. This is an incredible dude to join the discussion, and I was talking to John about this last night. Like, this kid on his own came up, one of the most incredible things I've ever heard a hitter say. Right? Like, one of the most incredible things I've heard a dude say. So I want him to tell that story in a second. So, this was, I think it was after his freshman year. Like, he blew up. Like, absolutely blew up. And this kid, if there was, and I always say it, if there was ever an 80 grade makeup, like, he's the gold standard, right? I watched him he was one of the first kids we took when we opened up the Orange County shop. He was like 14 years old, he was a freshman in high school, and he literally grinded every single day. Freshman year of high school, he said, I want to gain weight, 57 pounds, right? Sophomore year, his exit velocity, I think he went up like 14 miles an hour. Junior year, he comes up to me and says, Coach, I want to pitch. Bleak, I think I want to work on my pitches. He's like 84. Next year, he's 35. Everything he says he's going to do, he just freaking, and he had a 4.4 GPA in school, right? Showing up to the shop after games, right? Like dirty uniforms, just grinding. And you see, after freshman year, I asked him like what things clicked for him. And you told me that you adjusted your approach in BP, and you went to thinking like breaking balls out front early and pull the ball, right? I want you to expand on that, because that's one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard a hitter say. So we talk about feel. You find these things by grinding at the goal. Right? Go ahead and talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started out working, a lot of it was just like trying to create moves in a cage, because that's what I needed at the time. I just needed to move better, straight up. I needed to gain weight, swing harder, hit the ball farther. Like, it was as simple as that. And then once I made those adjustments, I had to start, adjusting my approach. So I don't exactly remember saying, or that conversation about pulling the ball, pulling the breaking ball, but I do know that was a big thing for me, trying to hit the ball out front. I'm a loose mover, long levers. I have to pull the slack out before, like I have to pull the slack out in order to hit the ball. And for me, an external cue for that is just to hit the ball out front.
You had told me that your first round in BP, instead of thinking oppo or anything else, you were thinking breaking ball out front. You wanted to pull the ball in.
Yeah.
Which made total sense because it takes more time. If you have short levers and you're real tight and quick, thinking to let it get deep would make sense. But for you, like that allowed you to get out here and put you on time for the fastball. That was one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard a hitter tell you.
Yeah, and that's what I do now still. I start out in, or at least thinking it. I don't know if BP throws going to throw it in, but try to pull everything first couple rounds of BP just to hit it out front, orient myself to that. Just because I need to do that and figure that out in high school. And like it's weird because there are times now where I can't pull the ball in the game. I can only go oppo, but in BP I can only pull the ball. It's weird.
So what are some of the things, when you think about your progression and your hitting and things that you work on, like what are the things that have been important to you and what are the things that you like put into kind of
I think what has been important to me is all the work we did in high school, because now the most important thing for me is just taking a load off, not taking as many swings. For every day I'll go constraint, from landing and then front toss and BP, and that's pretty much it. Like I have to be okay with, having a bad round of BP and like knowing that BP and the game isn't the same. And I think like it's a big piece of maturity that I've gotten over the years that, to understand that you have 3 shitty rounds of BP, you're not gonna, that doesn't have any effect on the game. And like I'm a pitcher and a hitter, so more swings I take isn't necessarily a good thing. That's probably been the biggest piece since I've gotten to college.
especially because of the workload on both sides.
Yeah.
For sure. Who else? Zion. You said something to me yesterday, and if you think about great hitters, you think about recall, right? Recall.
Absolutely.
So this kid says to me yesterday, he goes, Coach, you remember when we did that one-hand finish swing and I went up 6 miles an hour on my exit velocity? Because I asked him what was important to him. And that was his answer. So we were messing around in the cage and trying differences between, one-hand finish, two-hand finish. And at the time, he was a two-hand finish guy. Goes to one-hand finish, he went up 6 miles an hour right away. And he's a super bottom line, right? So talk about some of the things you've been working on. Because, you're absolutely one of the best ball strikers in the country in your class, and you will absolutely have a shot to go in the first round also.
Well, what I always start with constraint swings, because I feel like my fat side is way better from constraint. But I was talking in that case over there, and it's really because I try to do too much with my lower head. So we're working on just staying there, not trying to do too much. And I would work on constraint, bringing it back, just so I feel like I'm not going way out and it's impossible to bring it back there.
Anything else?
Yeah. Not really. It's really just kind of stay out of my legs too much.
Yes. I think there's a lot of misinterpretations in hitting and just in movement in general, right? Like we always have this concept of power comes from our legs, right? But it really doesn't. Like that's not how it works. Our upper body is delivering the punch, and to use our legs well is to compress our legs into the ground, right? That doesn't come from the legs, it comes from here. Creating ground force, right, is really important, right? That's what all the data says, right? But it's not from coming up out of the ground, it's from the upper body compressing energy through the legs into the ground. And when you get into the legs, you end up coming up out of it. Does that make sense? And you get too much tension in there. So cool thing, we'll send all you guys as soon as we get them in. So do you remember when we try to do the band drills around the ankles and hold them spread out with like the loop bands? So loop bands always like roll up your ankles. So we got bands that we created basically. You just slip over your cleats, right? And Wallenbrock came up with that drill with put the bat between the feet and hold the tension in. But in reality, all the tension wants to work out and away, right? That's why the bands I like them better. I like both drills, but I like the bands better. I think it's better feel. But you have to hold the pressure out instead of in when you use it. So we'll send those to everybody so we can get those things. What you got, dude?
I think that a big thing for me too is almost like feeling like I have loose legs. It's like when I would get into them too early, it's kind of that same thing. Like I pop out of them and I come over balls and like top spin more balls with full side, or just like not hit them as well as I could. And I always thought it was something to do with my upper body, but it's really that I was in my legs too early, and I try to like feel like I'm loaded more, and it just caused me to come up. So like now when I kind of like feel like I have loose legs, I'm almost like falling into my front side, and then like I'm getting into my legs at the right time versus being in too early and then coming out of them at impact. So I think just like feeling loose legs was kind of like a really, like it was like unlocked, like how to use my legs the right way.
So Rick, you have some of the best feel at anybody that I've ever worked with. Your ability to make adjustments, right, is crazy. Because we didn't even get to spend a ton of time together. And we had some really cool stuff with that. So, expand on some of the things that you feel like have been important to you offensively.
I mean, growing up, I never had hitting coaches or anything like that. My dad was always see ball, hit ball, throw your hands. That was the idea until we met in 16. I mean, you remember the swing I had? It was real, just handsy, down and across, just able to make contact. And I think you said something right now where we think the power comes from our legs. And we found out together that my ability to drive the ball is really coming from my hands. So working with you was always finding a way to put myself, my body in a position to make those moves better and cleaner. And like you said, we haven't really had time together throughout the years, but I've always come back to you and always gave you a call whenever I needed something, because you've always been able to find, giving me cues and to make adjustments on my own while I'm not around, you know? And you've always had the mind to bounce ideas quickly and give me different options in order to make those feels happen. And it's always been successful. And until recently, we haven't seen each other in about 3 or 4 years. And this past season for me was the toughest year of my career. Just I played less, and I just couldn't create the feels that I had created in the past. And just grinding through that, I mean, I put myself in a position that I thought was better, but in reality ended up being worse for what I was trying to do at the plate. You know, I'm thinking more in my legs, more on my backside, you know, all that created moves that wasn't ideal for my body type. You know, like I'm not that tall, I'm not that long, I'm kind of tight, I'm strong. So that strength that I have a lot of times can be my weakness when I try to get strong to the ball. So like the cues for me have always been, I always go high tee, just trying to create like that flat bat path, just contact. And then it's got to be loose. The more I get in my legs, the worse like my path gets almost. I just gotta stay loose up top, stay loose in my legs, and let the hands drive the swing. But I mean, you've always had a way to like bring me back to that, you know, because if one starts to struggle, you know, you need results at the pro level. You can hit great in VP, but if you don't put any numbers up, like you're not going to be there very long. So it's always that grind, and you've always helped me get back to the right feels.
When you think about it, you have the opposite body of Paul, right? Shorter levers, super tight, right? You're going to need very different thoughts, very different moves, very different cues, right? Very different approach, right? Out front versus maybe more let it get deep, right? Yeah. So it's you know, everything has to be individual, and you know, it's amazing that how quickly you could make all those adjustments, because it was like, I mean, it was fast. You went from an AI guy that was, you know, could get the barrel on the ball, weak hands, weak feel for the barrel, even with that swing, you could make contact. And there wasn't a lot of cues. First year in the Frontier League, second you go back, get a bunch of pumps, then came back, then you go to Mexico, like 16 and 150, now you've been in the big leagues in Mexico since. You know? And here, like, think about it, you've only been here a week, and EVs have gone up like
10. I mean, just from putting myself in a position
consistently
to move, just to move, you know, like without me knowing, I put myself in a position where my body just wasn't able to do what it's supposed to. And like, I've always worked out. I've always, maybe not in the right way, but I've always found a way to keep me strong. So that's like kind of gave me the ability to, when the barrel gets there, I strike it hard. But it's like, when you lose the ability to get the barrel there consistently, that's where the problems come in. And that's where like my body, putting myself in positions I've struggled with recently, and that's why I'm here right now, trying to create the feels that I can take back with me. Because I'm only gonna be here one more week, and I might not see you at all. Hopefully, I try to come back, but taking those cues with me that I can find here to create those moves on my own. Because you're not gonna be with me every single day. You're not gonna, so I gotta find a way to make all of that happen on my own.
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier. Paul, I don't know if you hear this, but I said like, a long time ago, like the first 108 Open, my biggest failure as a coach, I was a swing coach early. And then, I started to be more of a movement coach, right? Trying to figure out how to get guys to move better to get better results. And you have to take those two things and you got to blend them together so guys can have the robustness in the system to be able to consistently hit, and they have to understand how to do it on their own. That's why you have to have more conversations. That's why you have to explore stuff.